Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a single, unbelievably dynamic year, 1926.
Hmm.
I mean, we often think of the Roaring Twenties as this blur of flappers and jazz.
Right. Just one big party.
Exactly. But when you stop the clock on 1926, you realize this wasn't just a year of celebration. It was. It was a profound global nexus point.
That's it. That's the crucial insight right there.
Our sources show a year where old empires were finally fading, new technologies were just exploding.
And the foundations of the world we're in now, politically, culturally, were being, well, violently laid down.
I think you're right. We tend to think about history in decades, you know? But 1926 feels like a historical funnel.
It really does. The sheer velocity of change. I mean, when you look at the day-to-day timeline, it's just staggering.
And you've provided us with this fantastic stack of source material. It covers everything.
Geopolitical earthquakes, fundamental scientific breakthroughs, you name it.
So our mission is to extract those surprising connections and really get to the so what of it all, to give you a high-definition view of how this one year shapes the next century.
Absolutely. It feels like every month delivered some world-altering event.
And often contradictory ones.
Oh, completely. You've got the birth of Queen Elizabeth II and Miles Davis on one hand.
And on the other, you have the silent film era basically being killed by sound and the rise of these brutal European dictatorships.
This here is its own history book.
It really is. So let's begin where the biggest risks and arguably the biggest dreams were playing out.
In the air.
In the air, with the innovation engine just running at full tilt. So the early part of 1926 was really defined by this literal race to conquer the last geographical frontier.
The North Pole.
The North Pole. It's a story of, incredible ambition, but also technological limits and, well, frankly, historical deception.
The whole world is obsessed with it. It was seen as the ultimate test for early aviation.
And in May 1926, you have this window of just 3 days that saw two monumental claims.
And one of those claims has been permanently stained by doubt ever since.
So the first one, on May 9th, this involved the American explorer Richard E. Byrd and his co-pilot Floyd Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
They took off from Spitsbergen, Norway, in the Josephine Ford monoplane.
And they came back as international heroes. They claimed to be the first to fly over the pole.
Parades were held, medals were handed out. It was, the quintessential American adventure story for the era.
But there's always a but.
Yeah.
Even at the time, some experts were a little skeptical.
Really? Right from the start?
Oh, yeah. The flight time Byrd reported 15 hours and 44 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He just raised immediate questions.
Why? What was the issue?
Well, could the monoplane have possibly covered that distance to the pole and back in that time? The math for the aircraft at that period, it just didn't seem to add up.
And this is where the deep dive gets really valuable, because the narrative everyone celebrated in 1926, it started to unravel.
Decades later, yeah, in the 1990s.
The discovery of Byrd's diary in 1996.
That was the smoking gun.
It contained an entry that suggested the plane turned back, about 150 miles short of the pole.
Because of a reported oil leak.
Uh-huh.
And not only that, the navigation records in the diary, they looked off.
What do you mean off?
There appeared to be erasures, adjustments, things that pointed toward a modified route, not a fully successful one.
So he might have fudged the records.
It creates this massive historical question mark. It suggests a major pillar of 20th century exploration mythology was, at best, a fabrication or, maybe a deliberate lie for glory.
Wow. And that really speaks to the pressure on these explorers back then.
Oh, absolutely. The need to be first no matter what.
What's so remarkable, though, is the contrast with what happened just 3 days later. The world got its undisputed achievement.
Correct. But it wasn't with a plane.
No.
On May 12th, Roald Amundsen, a giant of polar history, he, along with Lincoln Ellsworth and Umberto Nobile, definitively flew over the North Pole.
But they used the airship Norge.
And that distinction is vital. Airships, they didn't have the speed of fixed-wing aircraft, but they offered stability and endurance.
Which is exactly what you need for those kinds of conditions.
Exactly. Amundsen's success was undeniable. And it kind of confirmed the utility of airships right at the moment when planes were starting to eclipse them.
So you have this technological competition playing out in real time, but that acceleration in aviation, it was outpacing safety, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. Often leading to tragedy, which brings us to the infamous Orteig Prize.
That was the prize for the first nonstop flight across the Atlantic.
A $25,000 prize. And it fueled this almost reckless ambition.
And the human cost was just brutally illustrated on September 21st.
The French war ace René Fonck.
He attempted to launch his massive, modified Sikorsky S-35 from Roosevelt Field in New York.
And the plane was just overloaded. Way too much fuel, too much equipment.
And our sources described just an immediate tragedy. The plane crashed right on takeoff.
Bursting into flames right in front of newsreel cameras, spectators, everyone.
2 of his crew died instantly. Fonck survived, but it was such a public demonstration of how dangerous this new era was.
And how unregulated it was.
Right.
This kind of inherent public danger acted as a catalyst, though. Just a few months before that crash, on May 20th, the U.S. Congress passed the Air Commerce Act.
So you have the Fonck tragedy illustrating the need for regulation.
And the act was the foundational response. It was the critical institutional step.
So what did it actually do?
Well, it initiated the federal licensing system for pilots, for mechanics, and, crucially, for the planes themselves.
So setting standards.
Exactly. Government standards for safety and reliability. It paved the way for commercial air routes, air traffic control. I mean, the entire infrastructure of modern civil aviation.
It moved flying from a daredevil hobby
to a recognized, if still pretty risky, mode of commerce and transportation.
So the desire for glory leads to recklessness, which leads to legislation, all in 1926. Now, let's transition from that highly visible, very dramatic world of early flight to an event that was tiny, quiet, and almost completely ignored.
But which launched the future in a much more literal sense.
Rocketry.
This is one of those profound history happened here and nobody noticed moments.
March 16th in Auburn, Massachusetts, Robert H. Goddard launches the world's first liquid fuel rocket.
Yeah. And when you say launch, you have to be really clear.
This was not a massive spectacle.
Not at all. The flight lasted, what, 2.5 seconds?
2.5 seconds. It reached an altitude of about 41 feet.
And traveled 184 feet across a field. It was not a show. But structurally, conceptually, it was everything.
Because before this, rockets were just glorified fireworks using solid fuel.
Right, like gunpowder, which gives you this massive but totally uncontrollable thrust.
And the innovation here is the control you get with liquid fuel.
That is the key. Liquid fuels, you use gasoline and liquid oxygen. They allow for metering and controlled combustion.
Which means you can throttle them, you can direct them.
You can scale them up indefinitely. This tiny, uncelebrated launch in 1926 was the direct, singular precursor to the V-2 rockets of World War II.
The Saturn V.
Every modern space vehicle. It was the moment spaceflight went from science fiction to, well, fundamental engineering principle.
It's just fascinating how you have the flamboyant, messy, public world of aviation running parallel to this quiet, disciplined, scientific foundation being laid for rocketry.
Oh. But for the average person in 1926, the real revolution wasn't in the sky.
No, it was in their living rooms.
The acceleration in media technology that year fundamentally changed how people saw and heard the world. It created the very concept of a mass audience.
We have to start with the dawn of television. January 26th, the Scottish inventor John Logie Baird demonstrates a mechanical television system in his lab in London.
He was demonstrating it for the Royal Institution, which is significant. It lent credibility. And a reporter from the Times was there.
But the images were primitive, to say the least.
Oh, very crude. Low-resolution flickering, often described as these reddish, blurry silhouettes.
But it worked.
It worked. The core technology, using a spinning Nipkow disc to scan the images, it showed that visual transmission over distances was possible. It was the first public, successful step.
So while that visual media is just taking its first baby steps, audio media is becoming a monolith.
That's a great way to put it. November 15th sees the official opening of the NBC radio network in the United States.
And this was a partnership between, Westinghouse, General Electric, and RCA.
A behemoth. The sheer scale was unprecedented. They launched with a network of 24 interconnected stations.
That centralization is the crucial insight here, I think. Before NBC, radio was often local, kind of chaotic.
Exactly. This formalized radio as a pervasive mass-market medium and, critically, as a tool for national identity.
So everyone could hear the same thing at the same time.
Millions of people simultaneously. Standardized content, standardized advertising, standardized news. It created this concept of a national consciousness in real time.
And while radio was cementing its place, the ultimate form of entertainment film was experiencing, a death knell.
The silent film era, which defined early Hollywood, was about to be obliterated by sound.
August 5th, New York. Audiences experienced the Warner Brothers Vitaphone system for the first time.
In the movie Don Juan,
Now, explain Vitaphone. Sound had been tried before, right?
it had, but it was always unreliable, hard to amplify, hard to synchronize. Vitaphone was a sound-on-disc system,
So the sound was on a separate record.
a large phonograph record that was mechanically synchronized with the projector. It was clunky, sure, but it was reliable enough to deliver synchronized music and sound effects.
And that provided an immersion that silent film just couldn't match.
Right. So Don Juan was mostly silent, but it had a fully synchronized score and a few sound effects. It just demonstrated the potential
And it signaled the beginning of the end.
for the entire silent film industry. They had to scramble to adapt. Within a few years, talkies would dominate, forcing everyone to completely transform their craft.
So just looking back at this first part, 1926 gives us the foundation for space travel, the networked world of NBC, the advent of television, and the death of silent film.
The technological velocity is just. It's not just rapid, it's systemic. It changed the very definition of distance and communication.
So while the world was innovating its way into the future, the political landscape was busy dismantling the fragile post-war democracies all across Europe.
It was an extremely volatile year that really solidified the trend toward authoritarian rule.
And the most obvious place to start is with the systematic dismantling of democracy in Italy, led by Benito Mussolini.
He was already a formidable force, but 1926 is the year his power becomes truly totalitarian. He was in control, but he used crises, real or manufactured, to accelerate that power grab.
Right, like the failed assassination attempt on him on April 7th.
Exactly. Whether it was genuine or exaggerated, he definitely used that event as a pretext to just tighten the screws.
The fascist movement used it to justify a massive crackdown on all political opposition.
And the decrees that followed are just terrifying in their speed and scope.
They show this clear legislative intent to wipe out any checks on his power.
Look at the timeline. October 23rd, women are banned from holding public office.
Which reversed some nascent progressive reforms.
Completely. Then, just over a month later, November 25th, the death penalty is reestablished, specifically for anti-state crimes.
Which is a massive psychological deterrent.
And the very next day, November 26th, all Italian communist deputies are arrested.
So he just systematically eliminated organized opposition in parliament.
It's a clear sequence, moving from charismatic leadership to absolute dictatorship, all codified in law.
And it wasn't an isolated trend, was it?
Not at all.
Mm.
Across Europe, you see this disillusionment with the perceived inefficiency of new democracies. It led to military-backed takeovers.
Like in Poland and Portugal.
Poland is a classic example. You have a national hero, Marshal Józef Piłsudski, who basically decides that democracy is failing the state.
So he launches the May coup between May 12th and 14th.
He seizes control, transforms the government into this military-dominated, authoritarian regime. He argued that the political divisions and economic crises required a strong, unifying hand.
So it's this narrative of the democratic experiment isn't working, we need a strong man.
Precisely. And in Portugal, the instability was even more acute. They had 2 coups that year.
2 in 1 year.
The May 28th coup installed the Ditadura Nacional, ending their volatile First Republic. Then General Oscar Carmona takes power on July 9th.
And this wasn't really about one charismatic figure like Mussolini.
No, it was a symptom of complete political exhaustion and economic collapse. The military just stepped in to impose order, and that military rule would last in various forms for nearly 50 years.
And Greece had its own whirlwind adventure in dictatorship.
A very short-lived one. Theodoros Pangalos declares himself dictator in January, tries to legitimize it with a sham election in April.
But he's ousted in August, and the whole thing ends on August 25th.
The pattern is consistent, though. Swift seizure of power, suppression of opposition, and the military asserting it's the only institution that can restore national health. 1926 is the year this just becomes rampant.
Okay, moving from the rise of strongmen to the rise of mass movements, 1926 was also home to one of the 20th century's biggest industrial confrontations.
The UK general strike.
A monumental 9-day clash that brought the entire nation to a standstill.
The core issue was the plight of the coal miners. The government had already declared a state of emergency on April 30th.
Because the mine owners were demanding longer hours and significant wage cuts.
Up to 13% in some cases. This wasn't just about wages, though. This was about the dignity and the economic viability of an entire industrial class.
So the general strike kicks off on May 4th.
And you have millions of workers rail, transport, steel, printing, all walking out in solidarity with the miners.
And the government's response.
They mobilized volunteers and the military to maintain essential services, and they framed the strike not as a labor dispute, but as a constitutional crisis, a challenge to the authority of the state.
But the general strike itself was called off after only 9 days, on May 12th.
It was. But the miners themselves, they stayed on strike for months.
They held out until October 12th.
And they lost completely. They were forced to accept the longer hours, the lower pay. It effectively gutted the power of the Miners' Federation. It was a bitter, bitter defeat for the British labor movement.
So you have this massive, prolonged struggle highlighting deep industrial turmoil in the UK. And yet, running completely counter to this, we have an announcement from Detroit that just seems to come from another planet.
This is maybe the ultimate 1920s juxtaposition.
On September 25th, Henry Ford announces the 8-hour, 5-day work week for his workforce.
While the UK is locked down by striking workers, an industrial titan in the US unilaterally establishes the modern concept of the weekend.
And Ford's motivation wasn't purely altruistic, was it? It was about efficiency.
Yeah. And consumerism. He understood that workers needed not only time to rest, but also free time to consume the products they were building.
So they'd have time to drive their Ford cars.
Exactly. A 40-hour week meant happier workers and, critically, workers with weekends free to go out and be consumers. It was industrial engineering applied to leisure time.
That's fascinating. Now, shifting our focus away from the industrialized West, 1926 was also drastically rewriting the map of Asia.
Huge transitions in China and Japan, especially.
Let's start with Japan. On December 25th, Emperor Taisho dies.
Which was a significant moment. His reign, the Taisho era, was characterized by a push toward democratic principles, relatively liberal politics.
And the very next day, December 26th, his son Hirohito ascends the throne. The Showa period begins.
And that's a tectonic shift. It signaled the end of that tentative move toward Taisho democracy. The early Showa era saw the rapid rise of militarism and extreme nationalism.
So this transition in leadership marked a profound shift in national ideology.
It really accelerated Japan's path toward expansion and conflict in the decades to come.
And at the same time, in China, internal conflict was just escalating dramatically.
On July 1st, the Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek, starts the Northern Expedition.
This was a massive military campaign.
Aimed at unifying China by crushing the various northern warlords who had carved up the country. This effort defined the trajectory of modern China.
And it coincided with other localized victories, like Zhang Zuolin's army capturing Beijing on April 17th.
The whole situation was incredibly fluid and violent. The Northern Expedition was this attempt to impose unity from the South, and it set the stage for the immense civil and international wars that followed.
Okay, so amidst all this internal volatility, 1926 did offer a brief, maybe fleeting moment of hope for global cooperation.
It did. The Structure for Peace, the League of Nations, gained a crucial member on September 8th.
The German Weimar Republic.
Which was enormously symbolic. Germany, a former enemy, was being brought back into the fold. It lent crucial legitimacy to the post-war peace structure.
But Germany was also hedging its bets a little, weren't they? They weren't just looking west.
Not at all. That's why we have to note the Treaty of Berlin, signed on April 24th between Germany and the Soviet Union.
Which pledged neutrality if either country was attacked.
And that was pretty unsettling to France and Britain. It showed Germany was willing to play both sides, undermining the anti-communist spirit of the Western powers.
And then there's this monumental internal shift within the British Empire itself.
The Balfour Declaration. Approved on November 15th, this was foundational for the modern Commonwealth.
Because it declared that the self-governing dominions, Canada, Australia, South Africa, were equal in status.
And independent from the UK, though united by a common allegiance to the Crown, it was this crucial structural recognition of sovereignty.
The beginning of the end for the centralized imperial model.
Exactly. And finally, a true moral victory that showed the League of Nations trying to live up to its ideals.
The Slavery Convention.
Approved on September 25th. It formally abolished all types of slavery. And the significance here isn't just chattel slavery, but forced labor, debt bondage, serfdom.
So it was a much broader definition.
It was a monumental, internationally coordinated effort to establish fundamental human rights standards, which is incredible considering how many political systems were crumbling at the exact same time.
It's such a paradox. A world becoming more fractured politically with the rise of dictators, while also making these leaps toward institutional peace and human rights.
It's a high-stakes, deeply contradictory year.
Okay, moving from geopolitics, let's dive into the moments that really define the public imagination, the cultural icons, the celebrity scandals.
And the raw power of nature and organized crime.
You have to start with the literary launch that continues to define childhood for millions.
Winnie the Pooh.
A. Milne's book, published October 14th in London, it just instantly created a cultural touchstone.
And it provided this much-needed escapism,
Yeah.
a gentle, imaginative style that was a stark contrast to the often brutal world of the 1920s.
Speaking of narrative, 1926 gave us one of the most remarkable coincidences in celebrity history.
The two disappearances.
Two extremely high-profile, bizarre disappearances within 6 months.
The first was evangelist Amy Semple McPherson in May, an immensely influential figure. She vanishes while visiting a beach in Venice, California.
And the media frenzy was instantaneous. She was a national celebrity.
Nearly a month later, she reappears in Mexico. She claims she was kidnapped, tortured, held for ransom.
A sensational story.
But the police investigation and public scrutiny led many to believe the story was fabricated, maybe to cover up an affair or just burn out.
Then, in December, we have the bizarre disappearance of the queen of the detective story herself, Agatha Christie.
She vanished from her home in Surrey, left behind this mystery that, even she might have struggled to write.
And she was found 11 days later.
At a Harrogate hotel, checked in under the surname of her husband's mistress.
Oh.
She claimed amnesia, never fully explained it. What stands out is just this double dose of high-stakes, publicly consumed mystery in the same year.
Away from scandal, though, 1926 also delivered a major moment in sports, a societal barrier broken.
On August 6th, the American Gertrude Ederlo became the first woman to successfully swim the English Channel.
From France to England. And only a handful of men had ever done it before her.
And she didn't just break the gender barrier, she shattered the record.
She beat the existing men's record by almost 2 hours.
It was a massive international moment. She proved decisively that women were capable of surpassing men in these areas of extreme athletic performance. She got a ticker tape parade when she came home.
Speaking of public reaction, let's look back at the infancy of broadcasting and that hilarious story of the panic it caused.
Oh, this is a great one. January 16th, the BBC aired a radio play, a satire by Ronald Knox about a workers' revolution in London.
It was meant to be a parody of exaggerated newspaper reports.
But the public, many of whom were brand new to radio, completely missed the nuance, or the announcement that it was satire.
So they thought it was real.
They absolutely did. It caused widespread panic, people calling police stations, flooding emergency lines, genuinely believing London was under attack.
It's a perfect early example of the sheer uncritical power of new media.
The immediacy of radio made the unreal sound completely real.
Now let's pivot sharply to the brutal realities, the dark side of the Roaring '20s.
In Chicago, the rise of Al Capone was hitting its apex.
And the violence was escalating to industrial levels. Capone was based in Cicero, Illinois, which was basically his own personal kingdom.
And on September 20th, the North Side Gang, led by Bugs Moran, tried to assassinate him. They drove past his headquarters, the Hawthorne Inn.
And sprayed the building with over 1,000 rounds of machine gun fire in broad daylight.
1,000 rounds. It just illustrates the total breakdown of civic order.
And the cold-blooded brutality of the gang wars.
Capone was eating lunch, but he escaped by diving to the floor. The event just cemented his reputation for power and ruthlessness.
And the power of nature was equally brutal that year. On September 18th, the Great Miami Hurricane.
A catastrophic event. The scale of the devastation in Miami was immense. Sources say over 100 people were killed.
And the property damage, when you adjust it for today, is something like $100 billion.
It's staggering. It effectively ended the massive speculative real estate boom that had characterized Florida in the early 20s. A violent correction.
And there was another one just a month later in Cuba that killed 650 people.
Yeah, underscoring the ongoing human costs.
Finally, we can't overlook the less televised but equally tragic, large-scale disasters.
On March 14th, the El Varilla train accident in Costa Rica. An overloaded train derailed on a bridge, killing 248 people.
Just horrific. And across the world on October 16th, a devastating military accident in China.
An ammunition explosion on the troop ship, Guangdong. It killed an estimated 1,200 people.
It's a grim reminder of the high human cost of the internal conflicts raging in China at the time.
To really capture this idea of 1926 as a pivot point, we have to look at who was taking their final bow and who was just making their entrance.
The pantheon of the departed, These are figures who represent the end of the 19th century spirit.
And the silent film era.
Let's start with the one death that felt like the end of an entire generation of stage showmanship. Harry Houdini.
He died on Halloween, October 31st. A ruptured appendix. It was this cruel irony for the master of illusion.
The one trick he couldn't escape was the frailty of the human body.
His death really ended an era of that highly stylized, sensational magic.
We also lost huge figures who defined modern art and architecture. Claude Monet died on December 5th.
The definitive end of the initial wave of Impressionism.
And on June 10th, the iconic Spanish architect Antoni Gaudí died after being hit by a trolley.
Still working on his magnum opus, the Sagrada Familia. His death marked the close of the Catalan modernism movement.
In pop culture, two figures who represented earlier forms of mass media left us. Rudolph Valentino.
The definitive silent film heartthrob. He died on August 23rd at only 31.
And his death caused mass hysteria.
An intense media spectacle. It was the end of that idealized silent screen male hero.
Then we have Annie Oakley, the famed American sharpshooter. She died on November 3rd.
And she really represents the closing of the frontier and the Gilded Age's traveling shows.
The link to American history is even more explicit with the death of Robert Todd Lincoln on July 26th.
The last surviving son of President Abraham Lincoln. His death directly links the Civil War generation
to the high-energy modern jazz age, a literal bridge between two vastly different centuries.
We also lost influential thinkers like the poet Rainer Maria Rilke.
And in science, the world lost Heike Kamerlingh-Onnes, the Dutch physicist and Nobel laureate who discovered superconductivity.
A pivotal figure in early 20th century physics.
Okay, now let's flip the page to the class of 1926. The future icons whose births this year would just utterly shape the 20th century.
It's a stunning historical harvest. The sheer density of future stars is astonishing.
Let's start with monarchy and global leaders. Queen Elizabeth II was born on April 21st.
Destined to reign for over 70 years. You also have Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, future president of France, and Jiang Zemin, the future leader of China.
And the political agitator who would shape the entire Western Hemisphere's relationship with the U.S.
Fidel Castro, August 13th. And on the other side of the ideological spectrum, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk and peace activist.
An incredible contrast right there.
And then, in culture and entertainment, the roll call is just phenomenal. This is the year modern music was born.
Chuck Berry, October 18th, the father of rock and roll.
And Miles Davis, May 26th. The pioneer of cool jazz. Those two alone fundamentally redefined the sound of the post-war world.
And add to that the literary giants. Allen Ginsberg, the voice of the Beat generation.
And Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, shaped the American conscience around justice.
And the masters of comedy and visual media, David Attenborough.
Leslie Nielsen, Jerry Lewis, and Mel Brooks. That group defines the style and humor of the next 50 years.
It's a remarkable convergence. The people who defined the sound, the conscience, and the humor of the 20th century all arriving in the same 12 months.
And one quiet entry in our source material, but one that hints at future challenges. 1926 saw the initial chemical synthesis of phencyclidine PCP, angel dust. Its disruptive impact wouldn't be known for decades, but the compound itself entered the world in this year.
Wow. And just before we wrap up, let's quickly acknowledge the intellectual achievements honored at the time, the Nobel Prizes.
They give us a final intellectual snapshot. Jean-Baptiste Perrin won for physics, Theodor Svedberg for chemistry.
And critically, the Peace Prize was shared by diplomats Aristide Briand of France and Gustav Stresemann of Germany.
For their monumental efforts in negotiating the Locarno treaties, a hopeful symbol amidst all the geopolitical volatility we've been talking about.
So if we connect all these disparate threads back to the bigger picture, the profound lesson of 1926 is that the world just never transforms in a neat, orderly way.
Not at all. It was a year of profound, simultaneous global realignment. You see dictatorships solidifying power in Italy and Poland, pushing the continent toward conflict.
While at the same time, you have these foundational principles of global cooperation being established, Germany joining the League, the Slavery Convention.
The political and structural fragility was matched only by the sheer technological velocity.
The first liquid fuel rocket launch, the birth of the NBC network, the end of the silent film era.
All happening as the UK was gripped by its largest ever industrial strike, and Chicago was being shredded by machine gun fire.
History is rarely sequential. It's a volatile collision.
Exactly. The sheer magnitude of creation and destruction, celebration and upheaval, it proves that the 20th century stopped preparing and started happening in 1926.
That's a great way to put it.
So consider this. The year that saw the birth of global cultural icons like Chuck Berry and Miles Davis, shaping the very sound and rhythm of the next half-century, also marked the first known failed assassination attempt on Mussolini, which led directly to the brutal consolidation of fascist power.
Creation and destruction all at once.
What stands out to you most about this volatile collision of innovation and chaos, and how do you think that constant historical contradiction defines the world we inherited?
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take something you think you know, a simple toy, a cultural touchstone, and we kind of crack it open.
And inside, you find a surprising mix of intense history, high-stakes finance, and some really cutting-edge technology.
Exactly. And today we are deep diving into the Tamagotchi.
Hmm.
You know, the handheld digital pet that captivated, confused, and let's be honest, probably emotionally scarred an entire generation.
It's the perfect subject because it's so easy to just dismiss it as, pure 90s nostalgia.
Yeah.
But a Tamagotchi is actually this powerful 30-year case study in business paradox and persistent technological evolution.
Right.
So our mission today is to really unpack the source material, covering its origin, its ruthless care mechanics, and its wild leap from basic pixels to being a fully Wi-Fi connected device.
And when we talk about evolution and impact, I mean, we are talking serious numbers here. This little egg, marketed by Bandai since 1996, has now sold over 98 million units worldwide as of 2025.
98 million. That is nearly 100 million people who have, at some point, felt that intense, guilt-fueled pang of a chirping plastic device demanding their attention.
It's an astonishing number, especially when you consider its very specific, almost accidental origin.
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the conceptual egg. The invention is credited to two people, Akihiro Yokoi of a company called Wheezy and Aki Maita from Bandai.
Right, and the concept was simple. Simulate pet ownership without the fiscal burden. But the design choices were intentionally very specific.
And what's fascinating here is that the final pixel art, the look that we all remember, that wasn't the starting point.
No, not at all. The original characters were first drawn in what's called a Heda-uma style.
Heda-uma. What does that translate to?
It's roughly bad but good.
Okay.
It's a deliberately awkward or unskilled drawing style that was trending in Japanese teen magazines at the time. So Bandai recognized that using this aesthetic and then converting it to simple pixel art gave the early Tamagotchi characters this unique, almost endearingly rough look.
So it felt like it belonged to youth culture, not some glossy corporate product.
Exactly. It had an identity that was completely distinct from, say, the polished look of Nintendo characters.
That makes a lot of sense. And the name itself is a fantastic combination. It comes from tamago.
Which means egg in Japanese.
And wachi, which is the anglicized Japanese pronunciation of watch.
Yes, and that watch element is really key to the initial concept. The design was originally intended to be a wrist-worn device.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so even though the final product became that ubiquitous keychain, the name stuck. It solidified its place as a pet that demanded constant time and attention, just like a wristwatch.
And their achievement was recognized in this truly unique way in 1997. They received the satirical Ig Nobel Prize for Economics.
They did. They were dubbed the father and mother of Tamagotchi for the whole phenomenon they created.
They certainly created an economy, but one that held a massive financial surprise for Bandai.
Oh, a huge surprise. The toy launched in Japan in November 1996, and it was initially marketed exclusively to teenage girls.
But that did not last long.
No, the appeal just broke that container immediately. It exploded into a global toy phenomenon in 1997. During that original run, the craze drove sales of 40 million units worldwide.
40 million, including 12 million in just the US and Canada. The sources describe the demand as so intense that Bandai employees were actually banned from carrying bags that showed the logo.
Just for fear of theft or being mobbed.
Incredible.
The sheer volume of sales is astonishing, but here's where that business paradox kicks in. The success story has a very, very sharp financial turn. Bandai completely miscalculated the fad's staying power, and they overproduced units on an enormous scale.
Wait, hold on. If they sold 40 million units in a single run, how does that possibly translate into a financial disaster? Doesn't the success just mitigate that risk?
You'd think so, but it didn't. The company suffered from internal miscommunication and just severe demand instability. The sources show that by 1998, when the craze just evaporated, Bandai was left holding millions of unsold toys.
And that resulted in
A staggering 6 billion yen financial loss.
6 billion yen.
All stemming from a toy that was one of the biggest hits of the decade.
That is the ultimate cautionary tale in managing explosive novelty. The company was so successful, but they were almost bankrupted by the speed of their own success.
And that failure forced Bandai to recognize that the core value of Tamagotchi wasn't just sales volume. It was the intense, non-optional customer commitment driven by the core mechanics.
Which brings us right back to that original design philosophy.
Exactly.
The backstory is that Tamagotchis are a small alien species that deposited an egg on Earth, and you, the player, must raise it through the baby, child, teenager, and adult stages.
And the goal, the thing that rewarded all that relentless care, was that the final adult character depended entirely on the quality of your care. Better care, supposedly, results in a creature that's smarter, happier, and, well, requires less attention later on.
And that required constant care is the genius and the cruelty of the whole design.
Yeah.
You had to monitor 3 essential needs. You have the standard ones, the hunger meter,
Filled with meals and snacks.
and the happy meter, which you could boost with mini games and, well, more snacks.
But then you had the third one, which always struck me as the most psychologically interesting, the training meter.
Yes.
This is where the emotional manipulation truly began. The training meter was about discipline. You didn't fill it by teaching it tricks. You filled it by scolding the creature when it was behaving badly.
And behaving badly just meant what? That it was calling for attention.
Pretty much. It would chime even though its hunger and happy meters were full, or if it refused to eat its food.
So scolding wasn't a positive training exercise. It was the discipline button you pressed when your pet was just being needy.
It creates instant guilt. You're forced to engage in that moment of discipline, which reinforces the feeling of being a parent who has to manage every tiny behavioral nuance.
And we haven't even mentioned hygiene.
Oh, right. The pet leaves droppings, and if you fail to clean them up, it gets sick, which was symbolized by that dreaded skull icon.
The clock was always ticking, and neglect brought swift, terrifying consequences. This brings us to the most controversial element that really defined the era: pet death.
Right. Why was the failure state so immediate and visceral? I mean, poor care in those early versions could genuinely cause the pet to die in less than half a day.
Less than half a day. And it wasn't just neglect. It could happen from sickness, old age, or in some later versions, even predators.
And the visualization of this tragedy varied, which is telling about cultural perspectives on death. The Japanese releases showed a ghost rising from the screen and a headstone.
Whereas the English versions featured a little angel, which I guess was meant to soften the blow slightly.
But regardless of the graphic, the distress was immense. Schools all over the world banned the toy because of classroom disruption. The sheer emotional toll it took on kids was huge.
There are even documented reports of teenagers sending the devices to graveyards for burial. That intense, non-optional emotional connection the toy forced on you was instantaneous and so demanding.
It's amazing how much social and emotional weight was carried by an 8-bit black and white screen. But the Tamagotchi didn't die out with the 90s fad. It came back.
And this time, it was technologically ambitious.
Bandai, having stabilized after that 6 billion yen fiasco, brought the toys back cautiously in 2004 with really subdued advertising. This was the Tamagotchi connection, also known as Tamagotchi Plus.
And the name change is significant. It signals the leap from an isolated T-chain to a network device. The connection introduced RDA technology.
RDA, yeah. It stands for Infrared Data Association. Essentially, it's a low-power, short-range infrared connection.
So you had to line up the sensors on 2 different Tamagotchis perfectly.
You did. But once you connected, your pets could form friendships, play games together, and most importantly, make babies.
That immediately changes the whole game. It's no longer a solitary duty, it's a digital community.
Exactly. And this paved the way for complex family lines. While marriage was featured in some very early versions using physical prongs, models like Tamagotchi Sum, MX, and Tamagotchi introduced true gene mixing.
So it wasn't just marrying 2 pixels and getting a random baby.
No, it became like digital crossbreeding. The offspring would inherit specific visual and personality features from both parents. Your family tree genuinely mattered now.
If your pet married a pet with a specific ear shape or antenna, your baby would share those characteristics.
Precisely. The concept of lineage became central to the gameplay loop.
And the leap from infrared to the modern era is astonishingly rapid. We saw the first color screen in Japan only in 2008, the Plus color.
And Bandai also expanded the digital world by supporting online apps like Tamatown in the mid-2000s.
Which is a crucial technical bridge, right? Because these devices didn't have Wi-Fi. So how did they participate in an online town?
Players would use alphanumeric codes generated by the toy itself to log into the website's flash game environment, Tamatown. They could play mini-games on the computer to earn gacha points. And then, here's the clever part, the website would generate a return code.
And you'd have to input that code back into your physical device to transfer the currency and items you earned online.
It was incredibly complex for a digital pet. You're essentially using the physical device as a password generator and a digital wallet, exchanging data through manual input.
It's a very early, clunky version of integrating a real-world toy with a digital ecosystem. But the modern era, that completely blows that out of the water. We move from codes to cameras.
Right. The Tamagotchi Pix, released in 2021, had a built-in camera. This enabled augmented reality pictures where you could take a photo of yourself with your Tamagotchi overlaid on the screen.
And in the same year, they also introduced the Tamagotchi Smarta device, housed in a smartwatch form factor, though that was only available in Japan at first.
But the real technological giant leap, the moment that Tamagotchi truly became a 21st century wearable, came in 2023 with the Tamagotchi Uni.
This was the first model with Wi-Fi.
That changes everything. It's no longer just linked to a second device or an external website. It's a fully networked toy.
So it can connect to an online environment, the Tamaverse.
Correct. Players from around the world can interact, and Bandai now supports downloadable content DLC expansion packs to add new items, characters, and environments directly to the physical device.
It went from a tiny toy that required you to set the clock to pause it to a Wi-Fi-enabled wearable that receives digital expansion packs.
That journey from Hitauma pixels to a networked metaverse device is stunning, and it just underscores why the Tamagotchi has maintained such an enduring legacy.
It wasn't just a hit, it founded a genre. Its global popularity led directly to the spawning of the entire virtual pet genre.
It did. It generated imitators like Tiger and Hasbro's Gigapet almost immediately.
And even its competitors acknowledged its profound influence. I love this quote from Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario 64. He pointed out that while everyone was focused on the spectacular 3D graphics of his game, they were overshadowed by the massive hit that was the Tamagotchi.
He said it was a tiny keychain boasting pictures made up of no more than 10 or 20 dots.
And he joked that the massively expensive, graphically superior Mario 64 had lost to the Tamagotchi in terms of cultural saturation.
That anecdote perfectly captures the magic. The emotional investment completely trumped the graphical fidelity, and that nostalgia loop is clearly working overtime. The recent revival has seen global sales double between 2022 and 2023.
Driven by both millennials wanting to revisit their childhood and a completely new, young audience experiencing it for the first time.
And the ultimate recognition for this little 8-bit egg happened just recently, in 2025.
It did. The Tamagotchi was inducted into the Strong National Museum of Play's World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Yep, and the museum highlighted its legacy, noting that it provided a respite from competition and fighting games, and promoted feelings of connection, caring, and customization.
So if we look back at this whole deep dive, the journey is just mind-boggling. From a conceptual wristwatch toy marketed exclusively to Japanese teenage girls, that accidentally drove Bandai into a 6 billion yen financial loss,
to a Wi-Fi-enabled wearable metaverse device and an official Hall of Fame inductee.
Absolutely. The data shows the original design was an exercise in relentless, guilt-fueled duty, punishing players, sometimes with death in less than half a day, for inadequate care.
Yet its enduring legacy, according to the Strong Museum, is that it fostered connection and caring. Which brings up an important question for you to mull over.
Go on.
How much of the Tamagotchi's lasting success lies not in its sophisticated modern digital features, but precisely in that intense, non-negotiable emotional obligation it forced upon the player? What other gaming phenomenon relies so heavily on the player's fear of failure to generate such lasting affection and cultural recognition? Okay, let's unpack this. We are about to ascend into a highly specialized intensely secretive world, the world of the Doomsday Plane.
Right, and that name, it's not official, of course.
No, not at all. But it's the popular, dramatic name for a class of aircraft that serves one chillingly crucial function.
Ensuring the continuity of government and military command, even after the unthinkable has happened.
It is the ultimate shortcut to survival.
And our mission in this deep dive is to explore these airborne command posts, detailing their true purpose, their unique technological profile, and the specific models.
And the models are used by only two countries known to design and manufacture them: the United States and the Russian Federation.
Exactly. For you, the listener, this is essentially a fast-track tour of the highest stakes airframes in existence. We're talking platforms where billions are spent to hedge against an absolute strategic collapse.
Precisely. The core function here is, well, it's unambiguous. These planes are not about presidential travel.
Not like Air Force One.
Not at all. They are designed to serve as an airborne command post in the event of nuclear war, a massive disaster, or any large-scale conflict that threatens to wipe out key infrastructure on the ground.
They are, quite simply, flying war rooms, built for systemic survival.
And the continuation of deterrence.
When you think about national defense, you often focus on the weapons, right? The missiles, the submarines, the fighters.
Of course.
But none of that matters without the ability to issue orders and manage the response. These planes are the ultimate C2 system command and control.
So the brain of the operation.
The brain that has to survive, even if the capital city does not. That's the foundational philosophy here.
So let's begin with that absolute necessity of resilience. If we look at the anatomy of these craft, we immediately understand why they're so specialized.
Right. In the United States, they bypass that Doomsday Plane moniker.
So what's the official name?
They're known as National Airborne Operations Centers, or NAOCs.
NACs.
And that official name, it really highlights the scope of the mission. The platform's entire purpose is to allow the nation's highest leaders,
The National Command Authority.
exactly, to allow them to issue commands, wage war, and maintain strategic control from the sky far removed from ground zero.
And the requirements for that task must be extraordinary.
They are. This isn't just a tough plane. It's an engineering marvel designed to survive the very definition of electronic chaos.
The level of modification required is, it's genuinely staggering. These modifications are what truly separate them from any standard jet.
That's the key. The sources make it clear that they feature a vast array of defense mechanisms, which are often misunderstood.
People think anti-missile flares, things like that.
Right, but the real threats they're built to survive are far more subtle and systemic.
So what are we talking about specifically?
We are talking about their ability to withstand the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP.
EMP. I've heard the term, but what does it actually do?
Well, an EMP is generated by high-altitude nuclear detonation. It's this rapid burst of electromagnetic radiation.
Okay.
And it couples with electronic systems, inducing massive, instantaneous surges of electricity.
And what would that do to, say, a standard commercial airliner flying nearby?
Complete catastrophic failure. Modern aircraft rely entirely on fly-by-wire systems, navigation computers, communication suites.
All digital.
All digital. And a significant EMP would instantly disable virtually all of it across an area potentially hundreds of miles wide. The NAOC, however, has to be hardened, shielded, and survivable.
So how do they do that?
Yeah.
You can't just, slap a sticker on a 747 and call it EMP-proof.
No, it requires a deep physical redesign of the airframe. You're essentially turning the entire aircraft into a layered defense system. At its core, you have the principle of the Faraday cage.
Right, like in science class.
Exactly. The metallic skin of the aircraft acts as the outer layer, aiming to shunt that energy around the interior. But it doesn't stop there.
There's more.
Oh, yes. All critical electronics are encased in additional hardened, shielded boxes. Think of nested Russian dolls, with each layer designed to dissipate energy.
So they have to isolate every single critical circuit. That sounds like an absolute nightmare for the engineers.
It is, especially when you consider the sheer volume of communications equipment they carry. They use extensive filtering, special bonding of metal joints to prevent entry points, and miles upon miles of specialized shielded cabling.
So the wiring alone must be incredibly complex.
Exponentially more complex and heavier than a standard 747. Every single cable, especially those entering the plane from external antenna, has to be isolated and protected against surges. It's an approach that prioritizes resilience over everything else.
And speaking of maintaining function, there is a genuinely surprising detail in the sources about cybersecurity. It feels, well, incredibly counterintuitive today.
It's the ultimate paradox of modern strategic design, isn't it?
Tell us.
The crews piloting these highly advanced, immensely powerful aircraft, they use traditional analog flight instruments to navigate.
Wait, what, you mean like classic dials and gauges?
Exactly. Dials, gauges, and mechanical systems.
That is genuinely shocking. Why revert to technology that is functionally decades old?
Because, and the sources state this explicitly, these analog instruments are less susceptible to cyber attack.
Ah.
When the stakes are global survival, you cannot risk a software glitch, a corrupted update, or an adversary gaining remote access to the flight controls. Analog systems are physical. They respond to inputs based on physics, not code.
It's the ultimate expression of redundancy through, what, technological regression.
You could call it that. They rely on systems that require a physical presence to manipulate. It just eliminates those remote digital vulnerabilities entirely.
So the designers are planning for a scenario where not only the power grid, but the entire global network structure, internet, GPS, satellite timing, it's all collapsed or been compromised.
Absolutely. Their design philosophy is, when everything else fails, we must still be able to fly in command.
And that complexity, it just underscores the fact that these aren't ferrying dignitaries.
No, they are flying command centers. They are staffed not by a small flight crew, but by dozens of military analysts, intelligence strategists, and specialized communication aides.
All prepared to guide the president through the first most chaotic days of a nuclear war.
And their operational context is what defines them. These aircraft have been in operation in various forms since the 1970s. For a long time, they were considered the best, maybe the only, chance for a Cold War president to survive an initial attack.
But they're not technically secret.
Not technically, no. You can find details about them, but they're very rarely mentioned. The U.S. Air Force, for instance, won't even publicly acknowledge owning some of them.
So acknowledged, but kept firmly in the operational shadows.
You're always ready.
That high-stakes mission brings us directly to the specific platforms. Let's jump into the core U.S. fleet, starting with the big one, the Boeing E-4B.
The flagship.
Right. It's officially the Advanced Airborne Command Post, but its project name is the fittingly dramatic Night Watch.
And the E-4 series was modified from a commercial platform known for endurance and massive payload capacity, the sturdy, powerful Boeing 747-200B.
That choice makes sense. The 747 was a workhorse. 4 powerful engines could fly forever.
Exactly. And you need that capability because the E-4B carries far more than passengers. It carries dozens of staff, massive server racks, and all that physical shielding we just talked about.
And its mission is crystal clear. It is the survivable mobile command post for the National Command Authority.
The NCA.
So the President, the Secretary of Defense, and their designated successors.
Right. If all fixed command centers like the Pentagon or the White House are gone, the E-4B becomes the temporary capital of the nation.
The legal and strategic center of government, just in the air.
And to facilitate that, it's designed to fly for extended periods. With aerial refueling, the airframe could theoretically stay airborne for days.
Limited only by engine oil and crew fatigue.
That's it. And inside, it's not just a big plane, it's segmented into 6 functional areas. You have the NCA area, a conference room, briefing room, operations team area, communications, even a rest area.
A flying Pentagon.
Literally.
Now, what's really interesting here is the current status of the E-4B fleet. It's not just a Cold War relic, it's undergoing a massive modernization push.
A huge one. And it reveals so much about strategic procurement today. Sierra Nevada Corporation won the contract to develop the successor,
Beating up Boeing, the original developer.
which is a very significant development. This new program is called SAOC Survivable Airborne Operations Center.
So they are sticking with the 747 platform.
They are, but a much newer version.
This is where it gets really interesting, particularly with the timeline. Sierra Nevada will be using 5 Korean Air Boeing 747-8s.
Relatively new, 4-engine passenger jets now being converted, and the sources tell us these base planes are expected to be delivered to the corporation by 2025.
So next year.
But, and this is the massive strategic insight, while the planes are arriving soon, the full conversion process.
Installing all the specialized gear, the EMP shielding, everything.
Yes. That entire process is slated to be completed by July 2036.
2036. That is over a decade of continuous top priority modification work. Why so long? Is it just bureaucracy?
No, it overwhelmingly reflects the technical complexity. You can't just protect against the threats of today. You have to protect against the kinetic, electronic, and cyber threats of 2050.
Future-proofing.
Absolutely. That decade-plus timeline illustrates the sheer complexity and the absolute necessity of rigorous testing and certification. Every single component must be proven to function perfectly under the harshest possible conditions. Speed is secondary to absolute certainty.
Must also require massive re-engineering. The 742 Fev 8 is way more modern than the old Nachi 200B.
It is. It has more commercial, non-hardened digital components that have to be completely stripped out and replaced with custom-built EMP-hardened systems.
So you're taking a state-of-the-art passenger plane and forcing it back into a high-reliability, low-digital military architecture.
It's a process of highly customized demilitarization, followed by intensive remilitarization, a job where precision trumps everything.
Okay, so if the E-4B is the decision-making engine, the mobile capital, we need to look at the E-6 Mercury.
The trigger mechanism.
Exactly. Issuing an order from the E-4B is only half the battle. The other half is making sure the weapons actually receive it.
And that brings us to the E-6. Its primary function is communication relay and coordination.
And it's built on a different airframe.
An older one, the Boeing 707-320. And a fascinating piece of aviation history here. Production of the E-6 lasted until 1994, making it the final new derivative of the classic Boeing 707 to ever be built.
Wow. The very end of that lineage.
Adapted for the ultimate strategic purpose.
And the E-6 has been with the U.S. Navy since July 1989. What's fascinating is its primary mission, known by the acronym TACAMO.
Take charge and move out.
What does that mean in practice?
TACAMO is the lifeblood of strategic deterrence. It focuses on the most critical component of the nuclear triad, the Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarines, or SSBNs.
The boomers?
Right. They're the most survivable leg of the triad because they're submerged, constantly moving. They're the guaranteed retaliatory force.
So if all terrestrial communication is destroyed,
the E-6 ensures that those submerged strategic assets can still receive launch orders from the National Command Authority.
how does it even do that? How do you communicate with a sub that's hundreds of feet underwater? Standard radio doesn't work.
This is where physics becomes a matter of national survival. They use a system called very low frequency, or VLF, communication.
ELF.
The waves have extremely long wavelengths. We're talking kilometers. And these long waves are the only ones that can penetrate seawater deep enough to be received by a submerged submarine.
And I'm guessing that requires a massive antenna.
A truly enormous one. The aircraft is essentially dragging an extremely long wire antenna behind it.
How long?
Up to 5 miles long,
What?
lowered from the tail of the plane.
5 miles. How do you keep a 5-mile-long wire vertical while flying a jet at high speeds?
You don't fly in a straight line. The E-6 pilots perform highly specialized, slow-speed maneuvers, often flying in tight, deep figure-8 patterns at altitude.
And that does what?
This low-skate, high-G maneuver allows gravity to pull the trailing wire straight down, maximizing the verticality of the VLF signal transmission to the submarines below.
That's an incredible act of specialized aviation.
It is, performed by the Navy specifically to ensure the command chain is never broken.
So the E-6 is the ultimate emergency signal booster for the submerged deterrent, and its capability expanded with the E-6B model, right?
Deployed in 1998, yes. While the E-6A focused on the submarines, the E-6B integrated the capability to remotely control the land-based nuclear arsenal as well.
So the missiles in silos.
Exactly. It added the Airborne Launch Control System, or ALCS. This means the E-6B can bypass compromised ground facilities and remotely transmit launch commands to Minuteman ICBMs across the U.S.
So we have a really clear division of labor here. The E-4B commands the leaders, acting as the mobile center of government.
While the E-6 Mercury commands the nuclear triad components, ensuring the orders are actually delivered.
One is the brain, the other is the nervous system.
The nervous system connecting the brain to the muscle of the retaliatory force. You need both to maintain deterrence.
This naturally leads us to a piece of the puzzle that never quite materialized, the Northrop Grumman E-10 MC-2A.
Right. And when we discuss these assets, it's just as important to understand the projects that were canceled. They reveal the strategic thinking of the era.
So what was the vision for the E-10?
It wasn't just a replacement for one plane. It was an incredibly ambitious, multi-domain platform. It aimed to consolidate multiple strategic functions into a single airframe.
Based on the Boeing 767, when you say multi-role, you mean?
A massive, unprecedented scope. It was intended to replace 4 separate, distinct, and highly specialized aircraft lines.
4. Which ones?
The E-3 Sentry AWACS for aerial surveillance, the E-8 Joint Stars for ground surveillance, the E-4B command post itself, and the RC-135 Rivet Joint for signals intelligence.
That is staggering. So instead of 4 different jets, you'd have one super platform that could do all of that.
That was the vision. The E-10 would have been the central command authority for all air, land, and sea forces in a combat theater, integrating intelligence and command on a single platform.
So why did it fail? The sources mentioned a pretty big contract was awarded back in 2003.
A $215 million contract, yes. The project ultimately succumbed to the sheer complexity and cost of integration.
Just too much to put in one box.
Exactly. Trying to fit 4 highly sophisticated, functionally distinct sensor packages, each with different power demands, cooling solutions, antenna configurations onto one airframe proved too daunting.
Both technically and financially.
Right. It resulted in a system that was exponentially more complex and expensive than just maintaining and upgrading the separate fleets.
So it wasn't a failure of vision, but a failure of integration feasibility.
That's the key takeaway. It demonstrates the U.S. strategy of continuous but slower modernization. Sometimes specialized platforms are simply more reliable than an all-in-one system.
And crucially, the sources mention one forward-looking detail that ties back to our earlier discussion about the analog pilots.
The UCAVs.
Right. The E-10 was also considered for use as a command center for unmanned combat air vehicles.
And that detail is immensely important. It highlights the strategic move toward managing networked digital warfare from these highly resilient airborne hubs. The MC-2A, though unfulfilled, was a forward look at integrating autonomous systems into the high-stakes command chain.
Okay, now we execute a strategic turn-and-shift focus to the Russian Federation. They're the only other country known to possess this critical class of aircraft.
And the necessity of maintaining strategic control is clearly a shared priority. They need a high-reliability backup system, too.
So what does their fleet look like?
Well, the details are far more opaque, but the function is identical to the U.S. NAOC's. Their current known aircraft are the Ilyushin Il-80, often nicknamed MaxDome by NATO,
MaxDome.
and its counterpart, the Ilyushin Il-82.
And like their U.S. counterparts, the Il-80 is based on a modified commercial airframe.
That's right, the Ilyushin Il-86 passenger jet, a 4-engine wide-body designed for endurance. It's their equivalent workhorse.
The visual similarity to the E-4B is pretty striking.
It is, particularly one key feature. The Il-80 is famous for this enormous, highly distinct canoe-shaped dorsal bulge, the hump running along the top of the fuselage.
What's in there?
That bulge is believed to house the plane's massive satellite communication antenna and data links.
So it's for global communication when ground systems are down.
Precisely. It's their hardened command center, stripped of windows.
Which would be a vulnerability to EMP.
A major vulnerability. So it's optimized purely for command.
And just as the U.S. is planning a transition to the 747-8, Russia also has a future replacement plan.
They do. It confirms this capability is not seen as a Cold War relic, but as a continuous strategic investment. They're planning to replace the older IL-80s with a plane based on the much larger, more modern Ilyushin Il-96-400 Meade.
The strategic approach is remarkably similar.
It is. Both nations use large, modified, wide-body jets. Both ensure EMP shielding and robust communications. And both are planning multi-decade investments in the successors. It's a mutual recognition of the fragility of terrestrial command.
And while the technical specs are more guesswork, the IL-80 series has made headlines through some surprising anecdotal context.
Yes, the human element sometimes leaks out in deeply bizarre ways. The December 2020 incident stands out.
What happened?
Russian police launched a hunt for thieves who had plundered a top-secret Doomsday plane while it was undergoing maintenance.
You're kidding. They broke into it.
They did. It's an incredible contrast, isn't it? The plane's purpose is to survive an apocalypse, and it's compromised by petty theft on the ground.
What was stolen?
Reports indicated roughly 39 pieces of radio equipment were taken from the cargo bay. And while the equipment itself is technical, its absence and the vulnerability it exposed raises serious questions about security protocols.
It underscores that even the most advanced defenses rely on basic physical security.
Entirely.
And there was another public appearance of the Il-80, more recently, in May 2022.
Correct. This wasn't a theft, it was a deliberate show of force. The plane's appearance during the annual Victory Day flybys was widely interpreted by observers as a potential warning to the West.
Especially given the geopolitical tensions at the time.
Right. And while we must remain impartial, the public display of such a sensitive, high-value asset immediately carries significant symbolic weight.
It's a statement. It says, We have not just the strike capability, but the resilient command system to coordinate a response no matter what.
Exactly. The planes themselves become part of the psychological deterrent. They advertise resilience.
So if we bring this discussion full circle, what does this all mean for someone tracking global strategic stability?
I think the existence, the design, and the continuous modernization of these aircraft, both U.S. and Russian, it highlights a unified strategic philosophy that really transcends politics.
And that philosophy is what?
That it relies on specialized platforms built entirely around surviving total systemic failure. The U.S. has the E-4B for command and the E-6 for communication. Every system, down to the analog flight instruments, is built to ensure the nation can retaliate or organize a defense, even if the national grid is gone.
The details of that resilience, the EMP shielding, the analog instruments, that 5-mile VLF antenna, it shows that designers are thinking about the deepest possible spectrum of threats.
They are preparing for a world where digital infrastructure has completely collapsed, forcing a return to the basics of command.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer financial and human investment, that multi-decade contract for the new 747s, it just underscores the absolute necessity of maintaining command and control.
C2 is deemed more important than the physical survival of any one fixed command structure. The priority is resilience and mobility.
Which brings us back to that provocative detail we noted about the unfulfilled E-10 program.
The unmanned combat air vehicles.
Right. Our discussion today focused heavily on resisting EMPs and cyber attacks, specifically by leaning on analog instruments for navigation and physical hardening for command.
But the source material mentioned the E-10 was being considered for commanding those unmanned vehicles. And, well, this raises a critically important question for the future, something for you to mull or explore on your own.
In a future conflict where the strategic command aircraft, the flying war rooms, must be protected by using analog pilots and mechanical instruments.
Will the highly advanced, inherently digital drones and unmanned vehicles they're commanding still be the biggest vulnerability in the entire command chain?
It's the paradox of future warfare.
Can the ultra-resilient analog commander effectively control the ultra-vulnerable digital weapon? If the drone swarm is the future, but the command center has to rely on 1950s technology for survival, where does the security truly lie?
A thought to land on as you continue your own deep dive.